All right. Okay. I see people coming in. Good morning, everyone. Questions for me? Anything? No? All right. So we are monitoring the chat for your thesis statements. Some of you emailed them to me as well. Try to put them in the chat if possible. We are giving feedback either by email or right in the chat. So please check both. And we're going to kind of continue. If you posted the thesis and you receive the feedback and you want to post another one or you refined yours, by all means do that as many times as it takes. We are going to do it until April 15th or so, and then we'll let you kind of figure it out from then on. So as for now, if you need help, we're here. So please use that. I think today is the deadline for your module. Well, not I think, I know that today is the deadline for your module 6 work. If you submitted earlier, I actually last night I went over and marked your submissions, and I have to say they are so much better than the module 3 work. I don't think anyone from the submissions that I've seen, and I've seen probably about 20, anyone who got less than A minus. So, you know, I'm very pleased with how that works out. So, and I have to say, I've been doing this module in different iterations for a while, and I'm really pleased with how much more versed you are in the subject of kind of African American and a representation of Blackness and all that, in comparison to what I've seen, say, a year ago from students. So I will be kind of talking to other professors and telling them that I see that I think we've been doing a really good job in terms of kind of talking about it and in getting the ideas out at the very least. Okay, the quiz for chapter 6 is due on Friday. I'm going to talk today about chapter 6. Chapter 7 is entirely optional. So I'm not going to lecture next week on chapter 7. I'm going to lecture on chapter 8, just so you know. It is there online. If you need to bring your grade up or trying to bring your grade up, go ahead and do chapter 7. But it's essentially, it's the, as far as I'm concerned, the least important chapter of the course and the least important chapter of the textbook. So I'm kind of glancing over it. So today's 6, next week is 8. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free. I will start sharing the screen and I'll go into PowerPoint. Arrange everything here. So we're talking today about media in everyday life. And we're going to kind of look at the idea of the popular culture and interaction between popular culture, media, and our lives. But so in this vein, I'm going to quickly show you a couple of things that I found. They just kind of surfaced in my various feeds, and I thought they relate, and they're just interesting. They are not on the PowerPoint online, but you don't need them for the quiz. They're just kind of like fun things to look at. Germany is doing a campaign on vaccination, and one bakery in Dortmund, Germany, decided to go all the way. So these are marzipan cookies in the shape of the syringe, and it says COVID-19 won't beat us or something like that on each of these little cookies. And they also doing cakes like that in the shape of a kind of a syringe, I suppose, as well. And they say 2021, bye bye Corona. So I thought it was a very, very weird, very fun way of looking at COVID-19. Then the other thing that I came across is actually from 2017, but it kind of, I think it made its way back to Instagram and whatnot now. So in 2017, Oprah, for her O magazine, commissioned Chris Bach, who is a New York-based photographer. He's a portrait photographer, to do a series of photographs, what she titled "Let's Talk About Race." There are 3 photographs where Chris Bach was kind of Oprah's ideas turns around our understanding of race. So here you have, for example, a white girl looking around and not seeing any of the dolls that represent her. The other one, this one is of course like kind of like beauty salon pedicure, where we essentially see like representation, reversal of the racial roles. And this one as well, where a darker skinned woman is kind of the client, while a white one is a maid. I'm not going to have a discussion necessarily about that. I think they are amazing kind of images to get us thinking about what we normalize and the particular thing and particular behavior, and how maybe unpleasant or different or all of a sudden jarring the other side looks like. So I thought I'll just kind of bring it to you. Now we are going to continue and start talking about the idea of the media. So the media, which we use so much, has a singular and a plural. Medium means a technology for storing and communication of information. So, and nowadays we use media to signify singular and plural, but medium is the singular and media is the plural. It influences meaning of messages it conveys, and this is kind of the overall message of the class today, that use of media also changes the message itself. Okay, so we've got all types of, you probably know better than me, media kind of includes news, radio, etc., etc. So we know that. Now, at this point, we live in the society that privileges social media. And what that means then is that social media increases that exchange between producer and consumer. So let's think about it this way. In the past, in ancient Egypt and Rome, etc., in the past, we had usually one-way communication. So think about the newspaper, New York Times, for example. 40 years ago, you would go to the nearest store, get a newspaper, read it. So it's one way. If you wanted to respond, you would write a letter to the editor, and maybe it will get printed, mostly not. Will you get response? Probably not. So that exchange, rather than one directional way of thinking, that is really, I don't know, originate 20 years ago. So it's still very, very new for us. In the PowerPoint, I have a whole kind of history of the proliferation of the media, how messages were delivered in different ways. I'm not going to deal with that here just because we don't have time. I want to concentrate on the idea how media mediates our everyday lives and practices. How do we consume media? Which media has the highest mediation impact, meaning that which media actually evokes or provokes us to kind of to spread the information around, to kind of to get glued to the screen, etc. So let me introduce you to this person. You don't have to kind of remember what I have in the slide. Just look at him. His name is Michel de Certeau, and he is actually a French Jesuit scholar. He was a priest and a scholar and a philosopher at the same time. Died in 1986, so a while ago. And what I want you to kind of pay attention to is his publication, The Practice of Everyday Life, from 1984. And in that, de Certeau essentially says that even though everything around us is attempting to control how we live our lives, we still navigate spaces and places and kind of realities of our life differently from the prescribed norms. So we all deviate, for better or for worse, from what is prescribed. So let me give you an example here. So Michel de Certeau says human subject is mobile, mediated, and mediating. So we're constantly negotiating and kind of thinking about how we, how we move physically and metaphorically in the spaces in the world. So let me give you an idea of what I mean. So this is, a mall. You will go shopping there. And the malls are spaces where our movement is by design kind of directed particular way, because the mall usually is built in a way that it would be okay for us to find things that we want. But in essence, the designers wanted to shop as much as possible and stay in the mall as much as possible and wander around as much as possible and kind of get lost in a controlled environment. So the mall is probably one of the highest, the spaces that would be highly designed and highly kind of mitigated in terms of how we want to move around. And yet at the same time, de Certeau, who is a philosopher and sociologist, actually did research about how people move through the consumer spaces. And well, I'm just having here a photograph of a little girl who kind of lost in the mall. But sometimes that's how we feel, right? We try to find something, we can't, and it just becomes too much. So Dessertone says, listen, no matter how much you're going to design all that and think about that and trying to lead to people to certain things, people navigate these completely different. And there are certain rules, and we can take them into consideration, but overall, the deviation from the path is really unbelievable. Okay. So and then he essentially says, listen, every person would navigate by the shortest way to food court or the store we need. What happens along the way is different for everyone. Okay, so this is kind of, so the idea here is, the mall is an example. The idea here is, no matter how much media and how much ideas we're presented with, we are going to kind of navigate them in a different way. So one of the ideas here to for us to think about in the times when then we could travel, now not so much, but hopefully soon. So you travel to a city that you have never been before, right? Nowadays, what do? You get on your phone, you figure out the maps, and then you kind of start looking at the things to see, things to eat, things to do, based on your map, based on your phone. So your phone and the media, so the entire media, the Instagram, maybe the feed into your Facebook, all that is essentially controls where you're going to go. So the space and the media interact to send you to places. Okay, questions, comments? Okay, so let's talk about masses, like mass. So when the media is any media. When we talk about mass media, we talk about media that is geared towards everyone, like popular media, for people who have education, don't have education, everyone. So this is the mass in mass media, a mass in mass culture. Mass and popular nowadays is used interchangeably. So that idea of the mass and masses is very important. So in the 19th century, that idea of masses was introduced, and it was introduced by Emile Durkheim, who is a French sociologist. And Durkheim is actually is pretty derogatory when it comes to the masses. I'm sorry, I'm going to have a lot of text here. We don't need to kind of to go through all of that, but essentially, the mass refer in terms of Durkheim, it refers to crowds, kind of. He thinks about people who are kind of working class, who don't have education, who are like automatons, and you can essentially kind of pull strings and tell them what to do. And that's the type of thinking about working class that was really prevalent even in Marx's writing. He doesn't give much credit to working classes as a kind of thinking individuals. In Marxism, the mass is translated as the people, like kind of the people. And that understanding of the masses also became the justification very much of the class structure, because if the masses are not necessarily thinking, or cannot analyze, and someone has to analyze and think for them. And guess who would that be? People who own businesses, and middle classes and high middle classes, and the government. So the word masses and mass society really came under scrutiny in the 20th century, because we kind of looked around, and people like Michel de Certeau and others, they turned around and thought, wait a second, that does not make sense. People think, and we cannot really treat kind of generalize and treat masses as this kind of unified body. There are so much, so much other things, so many other aspects. So the main problem of the kind of thinking about the masses is this concept generalizes and homogenizes various groups of the population. And right now with the idea kind of kind of role of the minorities and majority and the different groups, that really kind of that idea doesn't necessarily hold any power, any weight at this point. Okay, so then these are just definitions that we're going to be working with, and then we're going to move on and kind of look at other things. So mass culture is synonymous with popular culture, culture for ordinary people who consume the same messages, making them conformist and homogeneous. So this is how we understand mass culture, understood it, and in a way understand it now. That's popular culture. The question is, we take that and kind of how do we treat that idea of the mass culture, popular culture? And then mass media refers to the same thing, force of communication that quickly reach large audience, right? And perceived to have similar interests. So, think about shows, like popular shows on Netflix. They kind of they are geared towards particular audience. Now, we tend to in contemporary culture, we tend to kind of almost have non-judgmental approach to that. It is what it is. It's a category. Okay, questions, comments. All right. So one of the first things that came out as a critique of that idea of mass culture as a negative in art came from by now pretty familiar movement, pop art, that started in the mid-50s. So I'm going to show you a couple of things from pop art. This is Edoardo Paolozzi, and you see him down here. He is he essentially is credited with the kind of invention of the word pop for pop art. So this is one of his first collages, first work in the collage medium, where he takes advertisement, paper advertisement, and kind of glues them together. So here we've got a few of these, and it is called, that was a rich man's plaything from, so he took this advertising of the kind of pin-up looking woman from the and that goes as far as 1947. It's only 2 years after the World War II. So, and the entire series is called Bank, like with exclamation mark, as kind of, oh, something had happened. And right here you see the word pop, P-O-P. That's short for popular, but also short for, popping something, kind of opening something up. And that's what the art became known, that art style became known as. Again, on the PowerPoint, I have here a few different images and details and whatnot, but I'm not going to talk about that in detail. All I want to say is that essentially pop art is questioning the idea of the separation between popular and high, right? And they take the most popular images, the examples from the mass media and mass culture, and they use them in creating what would normally consider to be high art. And then they kind of really blur that distinction between high and low art. Okay, moving on. Richard Hamilton's did a little bit later. He did a very interesting collage And this one is important. I always show it when I talk about pop art because I think it's kind of a really interesting visually image complex. When he says, what is it that makes today's home so different, so appealing, from 1956? So in 1956, like let's think about this time. 1950s, we usually associate with what? Kind of this idea of the nuclear family in the United States, post-war prosperity, men definitely working, women taking care of the children. It's probably one of the first kind of periods where people try to get out of the city, go to the suburbs. That the idea of the American dream becomes very important. Of a house, two kids, a dog, a wife. And the man who comes from work, kind of, a woman serving martini to a guy, etc. All these cliches that we associate with 1950s, and a lot of them were true. It's also the time when Betty Friedan published Feminine Mystique, because she was so fed up with that whole idea of women supposing to care for the husband and take care of the house, etc. Okay, so Richard Hamilton, then, who is British, who is in England, in London, creates this. And so what he does, there's nothing here that he drew. He cut out all of these from various advertisements, and he creates that collage that shows us presumably the inside of an American or a British house. So he essentially shows us this is what our life has become. So instead of this kind of idea or ideal of, nuclear family, loving atmosphere, everybody sitting around the table, or everybody's, kind of cuddling together, we have here two beautiful people who do not react to each other in any way, shape, or form. He is clearly preoccupied with kind of bodybuilding, and kind of almost he shows us his muscles as if we're his mirror. We reflect to him how he looks. And of course, the hilarious lollipop kind of sticking where his genitalia would be, right? So this idea of like a large candy over here. So this is the man, and the wife is sitting on the couch, and the style of the couch, the most contemporary that you can get at that time. She is kind of like seems to be half naked. She's kind of almost supporting her breasts for some reason, kind of again trying to show us her looks more than anything. Her hair is under that cone because 1950s is the age of perms, right? So she's kind of clearly perming her hair, and everything about this is not about interaction between people. It is all about how I can look the best way possible. There are also other hilarious things here, such as this tin of ham at the coffee table, kind of the idea of the ready-made products that people can buy now rather than cooking. A tape recorder on the floor, the most recent kind of model of that you can listen to music wise. At the back there's a vacuum cleaner, again the most recent model. There is also instead of the ceiling, we have essentially moon, kind of there is no ceiling, the house is open, and instead of the kind of coverage, there is a moon, kind of the idea that we are getting closer and closer to space, and exploration of space and all that is also very important. And outside of the window, then we have kind of advertisement, just more and more billboards. So that's the world that we live in. And this is Hamilton's idea. He's being fairly critical of what is going on. in the world in the 1950s, and Britain definitely, along with the United States. Every European and Western country actually went through post-war boom, and the 1950s were very prosperous for everyone. So proliferation of kind of Americanized culture in Europe is also comes under scrutiny. Okay, so I have here a lot of other images related to that. I will just show you one kind of very quickly if you want to come back to that. It's not on your quiz. In 1992, Hamilton kind of comes back and does the same thing again. And he includes, you know, the stuff that we consider to be very much popular culture and important. 92. The walls of the room are covered in perforated cards for the early computers, and the man now is working on his desk, and the woman is the bodybuilder. Okay, so now I want to talk about, let me see if you have questions before I start talking.
May I ask?
Yeah, Christus, go ahead.
The name of Polizzi's piece that you showed us?
Okay, hold on. Let me go back. I was a rich man's plaything. I was a rich man's plaything is the piece, and the series is Bank. Okay. All right. So Guy Debord, here's his name. Guy Debord is another French theorist. And in the 70s, he comes up, even in the 60s, I'm sorry, he comes up with this idea, and he writes a book called Society of the Spectacle. Society of the Spectacle. So, kind of building upon Hamilton and pop art, I want you to think about how is that Guy Debord argues that we have become society that values spectacle, that values the visual and kind of advertisement above everything else. So he between 1958 and 67, Guy Debord forms a collective called Situationists International. And they're a group of artists that create kind of more performance art pieces and art than anything else. And I don't want to talk about the artwork so much as just this idea of kind of the idea of the experience of life. So what he says is that no matter where we turn around, we'll look on TV, we'll look at billboards, we'll look in the journals and magazines or newspapers, or just kind of everywhere. We're surrounded not by real life, but by constructed imagery. Okay, so, well, think about a billboard, right? A billboard with an advertisement, whether it's electronic kind of flashing or just a photograph, that was designed to give us a particular message. It's a very much constructed, designed image. He essentially says that in the past, say 1920s, people would go on the streets, and what we would see would not be those billboards and would not be those constructed images. We would actually see things moving around and kind of doing like there was nothing constructed for us to consume. It was just happening. But with more and more advertisement and more kind of use of technology and the media, We are now living in that society of spectacle. We go to movies to see, well, back then they did, to see films, to see, again, everything is essentially kind of these constructed images. So, of course, it's driven by capitalism, but Guy Debord is not as interested in capitalism as he is interested in what effects that has kind of on the person. So what he's trying to tell us is kind of something along these lines. We always present it with like everything is fine, everything is the facade, but nobody is really happy. There is no real happiness to that. So this is Guy Debord himself. He died in 94. So he analyzes kind of like what would be considered kind of conventional spectacles, like fireworks, large images, IMAX movie screen nowadays, not then, kind of bombs. And he says, so we take that, like say fireworks, right? Fireworks existed for a very long time, like Louis XIV in the 17th century had fireworks in Versailles. But that logic where everybody gets around and you see that spectacle of the fireworks, that now governs how we live. And that's what important for, and that is also at the core of the idea of kind of conspicuous consumption. We respond to the spectacle, we respond to the advertisement, and we construct our appearances and our bodies as part of that spectacle as well. So all that was once directly lived experience, kind of experience, he argued, has become mere representation. We are trying to represent things. Our life is dominated by the logic of the spectacle. So to illustrate that, I'm going to show you, I have to say, this is probably one of my favorite photographs in the history of photography in the 20th century. Barbara Kruger is a famous photographer, and I think we've talked about her a little bit in this class. She does in 1987, she does I Shop, Therefore I Am. And this is, of course, I think, therefore I am, from Descartes. She's kind of borrowing that. But this is kind of a later example of Guy Debord's ideas, situationist, because I am kind of my existence, how I understand myself, is derived from my situation and what I do in the society, and what I do is shop. And at the same time, she's also using to create art, which is, this is an art photography, but she uses every single thing that she uses is rooted in the commercial photography, for advertisement, kind of that commercialized ads that she's using, the font, the color, the contrast of colors, and the idea of the kind of the negative space, the sparsity of the space, etc., etc. Any questions? Okay, now I'm going to quickly kind of go into the idea of how media helps us to understand our sense of nationalism. And I mean, I'm preaching, I'm sure everyone here kind of understands that has happened, right? we look at the recent 5 years or so, and yeah. But let me just give you a couple of pointers here. So from historically, the creation of the newspapers always were either national or local in terms of the city. Boston Globe, right? New York Times, Genesee, whatever. So they always kind of serve either community at large or more community in kind of smaller community, but also kind of a larger one, like in Paris. You cannot know every single person who lives in Paris, but you can read the same newspaper. So this kind of idea of media connecting people through simultaneity, sense of experiencing events of the same time, becomes really, really important in the 19th century. And of course, 19th century is the time when the ideas of the nationalism come to the core. Before that, it was more of an ideas of political organization and democracy versus monarchy, etc. The idea of the kind of nationalism is really the product of the 19th century. So Mead, probably one of the, probably the most influential person who talked about nationalism, kind of, he created this expression called imagined communities. Imagined communities. His name is Benedict Anderson, and he was born in 1936, and I'm sorry, he died in 2015. He did not die before he was born. And I swear, he became a theorist of the nationalism almost inadvertently, because he is an anthropologist and he studied anthropology of East Asia and South Asia for a very long time, until he started thinking about, okay, so how do people kind of understand themselves to be a community if they live in a community that is large enough for people not to know each other? It's very easy to be kind of part of the family, you know your family. It's very easy to be a part of the very, very small village. Well, you know everyone, you know that this is village A and we're different from village B. But how do we kind of develop that understanding if you don't know everyone? How do we kind of form that identity? So, and he talks about several things that help us to kind of imagine ourselves as a community on a level of a country, say. And one of the things that he foregrounds are the media, whatever they are, whether it's flyers or newspapers, or that idea of the media essentially saying this is what happens, and everybody knowing that this is what happened in that country is very, very important. So this is, with that, we also have something where that Jürgen Habermas, a German theorist for a change. Oh, Benedict Anderson is American, by the way. He talks about public space. And this is so important, especially again, with what just happened in the United States. And Habermas is essentially, he's an idealist in many ways. He says, listen, what happens in the public space, what should happen in a democratic public space should be freedom. The public space should be emblematic of participatory democracy. It has to allow discussion for everyone, civilized discussion without name calling or recurring to force or smacking each other, you know, but a civilized discussion about everything, gender, class, race, anything. And he goes and he shows us this. He uses that. It's an example of the 17th century coffee house. Doesn't matter who painted that, etc. he wants our public spaces to be like British coffee houses of the 17th century, where everyone from the middle class or higher could come in and talk about any ideas possible. And these very, very often would end up as a shouting matches between people. But there was a law, and if someone kind of tried to hit each other, they would be taken out. That would never be tolerated. But in essence, this is an emblematic public space where you can come in and express your ideas, any ideas you want, without having any repercussions, as long as you don't harm physically another person. We've moved significantly from that. But in our experience shows that it's not always necessarily possible. But I think Habermas has a lot of important things for us to still think about. Kind of this idea of participatory democracy, and democracy is about expressing your ideas and expressing your ideas in public space. So it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that there are spaces where people can safely express their ideas. Not in private spaces, but in public spaces. And this is very important. And I'm going to stop here. If you continue on, there is of course a recording from other semester. If you go back to this PowerPoint, which you should if you're doing that test, take a look at this. This is an advert for Guardian about citizen journalism, which I think is absolutely amazing. It's an advertisement, and it kind of really summarizes kind of our idea of participatory culture in many ways, which is very interesting. Okay, any questions, comments before we go? Yeah, Christus?
I've heard like this one phrase get thrown around a lot, like the free market place of ideas. And just the discussion of the public sphere kind of reminded me of that. And I'm just curious, where does that phrase come from, if you know?
I don't. I've heard it a lot, kind of free market. And you know what? I'm gonna look it up. I don't know. To me, honestly, when it comes to free market, like I always get very suspicious when I hear word free market or kind of freedom of capitalism. And I will investigate, but I don't know where it kind of, and it seems like almost an impossibility, because when capitalism kind of steps in, it's very hard to be completely free without kind of brainwashed. But let me investigate. If I find something out, I'll email you, because I don't know how it connects to what Habermas is saying. Any other questions?
Will there be a like review session for either of the quizzes this week or no?
We were not thinking of doing that. We're thinking of doing chapter 8 as a review.
That's fine.
Okay.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. I'll see you. If you want to ask a question or talk to me, stay on. Other than that, I'll see you next week. How is it going?
Good.
Rachel, I'm trying to register for the CERC so I can kind of log in and listen to your presentation. But for now, it's not like somehow I cannot join that open air thing. I'm
Okay.
working on it.
Interesting. I just did, well, I recorded myself because I couldn't actually do it, but I did like an online symposium last week of like the same presentation, but on a completely different program. And I'm just like, I need to just take a break and then I'll figure it out. But if I find out anything, I'll let you know.
Okay. Oh, so
I'm doing it
which one
Friday
did you
morning.
do? I know.
I
yeah.
did the Hearst one, but I had to make it 10 minutes. So this one I can add a little more for it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. They want 15, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. How did that go?
It went well. As I said, so I actually had like a game come up. So I pre-recorded myself and had Tommy log in and just press the recording for me. So
Okay, well, see how technology works well?
yeah,
Sometimes it
it
allows
worked
you to
out.
be in two spaces. Yes. Okay,
Exactly.
cool. So you're gonna use the recording. You're not gonna talk at Cirque?
I think I'm gonna talk because the recording's just under 10 minutes. So
Okay,
I'll
yeah.
probably just like add more to it when I
Okay,
talk.
sounds good. Okay. All right, sounds great. Okay, so for this, we're going to see what they submit, and then again, we'll take 2 weeks to kind of to mark everything. So think about doing review session maybe next week for chapter 8, if possible. Okay, to get that, and for the thesis, if I can do Wednesday, but if someone can do Friday and maybe next Sunday. Okay, so I will do today. I will log in today to see what's going on, and then on Wednesday, and then if say Jelana, if you can do Friday, and Rachel, if you can do Sunday or somewhere about, that would be
Okay.
great, and then that will take us to.
The students seem to like really like the feedback. I had a lot
Yeah.
of them like emailing me back and forth, kind of just talking about the thesis ideas. So
Great.
I think they like that format.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so that's awesome. And I emailed you last night, and then I went and just did it on the chat, and I'm sure it's fine, and we'll see what go. And I see they kind of, I like the kind of the idea of the iteration of the thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Is there any, I guess some students sent me kind of more paragraphs, and I was kind of trying to get them to like narrow it down, because like obviously a thesis is supposed to be kind of specific, but I like kind of advise them to make it more condensed. Is that kind of what you wanted?
Yeah.
I'm assuming. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because they were like, it was like a paragraph with like 10 different ideas, and I was just like, it was good, but like I was just like, it, yeah, and I don't know. I definitely told them to do that. So I'm
Yeah, that's
assuming
great.
what
So
you
yeah,
wanted.
that sometimes, okay, so you kind of, you say, okay, I see that you're on the right track, you're brainstorming, or now let's think about,
Yeah.
remember the assignment is only 2 sentences, so let's see how. And I sometimes say, okay, I would start here, kind of thing. These 3 sentences say it's an introduction, and you don't have luxury for that, so start here and kind of think about how you can actually condense these 3 sentences into this. So
Okay. Yeah, I think it went well.
okay, great.
Finally.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I will see you next week then.